This is inarguably one of the best games of the 5th console generation. It's a quintessential addition to any PlayStation 1 collection. This game took the foundation of Pro Skater 1 and refined it into what I think is the best of the classic Pro Skater Tony games. The first game took people by surprise. It was revolutionary and extremely fresh, but 2 solidified the series as a staple of video games. It was overwhelmingly praised by critics at the time, and rightfully so, because even 20 years later, the game still stands up next to other PlayStation 1 classics. Metal Gear Solid, Final Fantasy VII, Crash Bandicoot 2, boom, right there next to them is Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. Hell, I'll even count it as one of the best Dreamcast games. Neversoft wanted Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 to be a bigger, better game, even one of the developers referring to it as a sequel and a half. So once again, Tony Hawk himself was very involved in the game's development. In an interview with IGN from 2000, IGN asks what it's like to work with Tony Hawk, and Joel Jewett, the president of Neversoft, said this: "Tony has been great to work with. He participates in the design process, plays the game constantly, and is always giving us feedback. The bottom line is that when we ask for his help on something, we can count on him to making that extra effort to help us out." Man, it just seems to me like Tony Hawk cared about these games. He wanted them to be good, and he enjoyed helping. I mean, he even attended promotional events. It feels like he approached this whole thing with a certain amount of enthusiasm. That's just really cool. This is the first game in the series that I ever played, and this is what taught me what skateboarding was, and it fascinated me as a kid. This wasn't just another video game to me when I was young, this was like a window into a whole other world. I remember getting this game when I was maybe 7 or 8, and Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 had been out for a few years at that point, so it was in this bargain area of whatever store we were in. I saw that beautiful jewel case sitting on a shelf like it was a music CD. This was before games were behind glass everywhere. My very generous dad snagged that thing up for me, and from that point on, the basement in our house was filled with the sounds of ska punk and old school hip hop. Oh man, I'm excited to talk about this series again. Tony Hawk is in the air these days. The new documentary about the series that's starting to premiere now, Pretending I'm Superman, has got me interested in revisiting this series for the 400th time. Plus, I figure it's about time I start to get rolling on this retrospective of a dead series that I started months ago. This second installment had a bunch of new additions that would go on to become mainstays of the series for years to come. Mainly collectible money, park editor, character creation, and most importantly, the addition of manuals. And let me tell you, not only is this a necessary thing to have in a game that's supposed to be representing skateboarding, but it also is something that would go on to create the Tony Hawk's franchise's identity in terms of gameplay. In that same interview I talked about from earlier with IGN, Joel Jewett said this about the inclusion of manuals: "I think it was much more of a revelation than an impulse. The manuals did not go into the first game, pretty much due to time constraints. Then there was the instant that we hit on linking all those cool lines with manuals to create bigger lines. Boom, lightning struck. When we woke up, it was a whole new skate game." And that is exactly what I'm saying. Combos become a much bigger part of the game here. Before, in 1, combos were just things that you did in the air or whatever flip trick you snuck into a longer grind. Now, manuals allow you to connect tricks together in ways that never could have been done. And this new way of creating combos is, in my opinion, the beginning. It's the genesis of the magic of Tony Hawk. So combos are how you get big points, and you can't just do single tricks in the air and expect to get rewarded for it. You got a combo. There's a risk-reward factor to combos that I think is genius. It's the genius of these games. It's why this gameplay is still fun 20 years later. The more tricks you do in your combo, the more points you get, but those points don't get deposited into your score until you land the combo. So every time you do a trick, in order to multiply your points, you risk dropping your combo and receiving nothing. This creates such a fun system where you're constantly linking together not just tricks, but different rails and ramps. Oh, and then the dopamine reward that is released in your brain when you finally ride away clean from a really long combo. This is why I love playing these games. This is the timeless system that Neversoft crafted. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 really amps up the sense of progression as well. The introduction of money lets you upgrade stats, buy decks, and even tricks, including special tricks. And many, many more unlockables, including a secret level called Skate Heaven, where when you enter it, you hear what I presume is God say this. Skate on, my son. There's an unlockable character that to me looks like one of the developers' OCs named TRIXIE, with probably one of the corniest bios in the game. And that's honestly saying something, because this is a game that has some pretty overly dramatic bios. And you can even unlock Spider-Man, and he has a bunch of different costumes too, and his own special tricks. This game has a lot of really cool stuff to unlock. It rewards you for getting good at the game. One of the greatest things in Tony Hawk is the music, and I think this can be agreed upon by most people who enjoy Tony Hawk games. This game gave me a healthy diet of punk rock and solid hip-hop from a very early age. Tony Hawk is one of the biggest influences on my taste in music, and that's honestly, it's 100% serious. To the point to where me and a few of my friends can pinpoint a song that was in a Tony Hawk game from a mile away. Here in this game, we have some absolute classic songs like You by Bad Religion, Guerrilla Radio from Rage Against the Machine, When Worlds Collide by Power Man 5000, and my favorite on the soundtrack, May 16th by Lagwagon. I just think it's interesting because at the time that this game came out, the digital music was basically non-existent, right? Like, it was only available to a very few amount of people. So I think like having a collection of good music was within itself an incentive to buy the game. It had more worth back then. Just a very, very well curated list of songs. Another improvement that I love in this game is it has a much bigger emphasis on exploration with its secret spots. Ollie up onto a roof, grind across a bridge, or grind a helicopter blade to make the whole thing go flying through the ceiling. This stuff is really cool. Some of these secret areas are legendary skate spots from the real world, like Carlsbad and the Brooklyn Banks. I mean, there is a genuine love for skateboarding in these games. You can feel it. Even though the mechanics of skateboarding aren't realistic, the representation of the subculture I grew up with is not that bad. It just has this genuine vibe of actual admiration for the culture. And I'm sure due in no small part to Tony Hawk's involvement in the development. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 feels like this little time capsule of not only video game history, but skateboarding history as well. This series is relevant not just to people who love video games, but it's relevant to people who love skateboarding. And I really think that these games inspired thousands of kids to try skateboarding because, well, I know that that's the case for me. I mean, there were lots of reasons as to why I wanted to start skateboarding, but I'd be lying to myself if I didn't admit that the Tony Hawk games were definitely a contributing factor. When I think back this hard about it, I'm honestly overcome with nostalgia. So many little vibes and feelings that I remember or haven't felt in so long just pop up when I think about this stuff. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 was an event. It's a landmark video game in history. It's one of the highest reviewed games of all time, and it was the driving force behind the creation of a genre. It's the game that became a benchmark for all others that wanted to be like it. This game knows what it is, and it knows what it's trying to do, and it executes that extremely well. This is a gosh darn good game right here.